HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, the creator of the world, was able to do so much and create so much in 4 days, do you not believe?
Wherever you get your podcasts from, or our own website, prismoftorah.org. This is The Prism of Torah with Rabbi Asaf Aaron Prisman.
Shalom Uvracha. In this week's Parsha, Parshas Beshalach, we know we have a very famous episode about Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. If you look at Rashi, when Bnei Yisrael were doing Shirah to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, praising Hashem after the huge miracle, Rashi says over there that every person, even the Shifcha, even the slaves, saw over there something that the top prophets weren't able to see, i.e. they reached a very high level of Kedusha, Ruach HaKodesh was with them, and they reached a level of Nevuah. The main question I want to raise is, how can it be Bnei Yisrael that we know Chazal teach us, they reached the lowest of the low, the lowest levels of Tumah, of impurity, because they were affected by the Mitzrim? How can it be that so quickly after leaving Mitzrayim, they were able to reach a level of Nevius, a level of Ruach HaKodesh, a level that even most Nevi'im didn't reach? How can that be? Question number 2 I want to pose is a question we mentioned in previous years. It's brought down by the Or HaChaim HaKadosh. Imagine the scene. Bnei Yisrael are running away from Mitzrayim. Running after them are the Mitzrim. They're totally trapped from all sides. Crazy Chayot Ra'ot from both sides. In front of them is the ocean. In back of them are the Mitzrim running after them. So what does Moshe Rabbeinu take upon himself? He screams to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, asking him to save them. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu answer him? Ma titzak elai, it's no time to scream right now. Daber el Bnei Yisrael v'yisu, tell Bnei Yisrael to go into the ocean. And Or Chaim asks, which is a very obvious question, what do you mean? We all know that our secret weapon is with our mouths, is to daven, to pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's so many psukim proving this point. Mima makim krasicha Hashem, v'chol asher yikreu ve'emes. And we know that the Goyim's power is ele barechev ve'ele basusim, with their horses, with their swords. Va'anachnu, what do we do in the times of need? Beshem Elokeinu naskir. With our mouths, we daven to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us. So how can it be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling him it's not a time to scream? Dafka, the time of tzara, be'et tzara, is the time to scream to Hashem. To answer all these questions, I want to share with you the following mahalach. It's true, Bnei Yisrael were totally deep into Tumah world. We know they reached Memtet Sharei Tumah. However, the way to get out of this Tumah is to disconnect from the Tumah, to disconnect from the Gashmias, and to have Emunah in Hashem. And that was what Bnei Yisrael were able to do. They left Mitzrayim, they believed and trusted in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as we all know from the song, but it's actually a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. It says, Zacharti lach chesed neuraich, lechtech acharai bamidbar. Meaning they were willing to blindly trust HaKadosh Baruch Hu and go into a place, into the desert, where they didn't even know what food they were going to have. As it says in the pasuk, V'tzeida lo haya lahem. They didn't have food, and yet still they blindly disconnected from the Tumah. They disconnected from the Tumah for what? To be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to go in the ways of Hashem. They realized that is what life is all about. This ma'aseh that they did, leaving Mitzrayim, that helped them totally disconnect from the Tumah, because they were able to give up on that, to go in the ways and the path of Hashem. This idea of disconnecting from the Tumah, disconnecting from the shtuyot that we have, that the Yetzer Hara tries to trick us, to waste our time, hevlei hazman. This is the way that they were able to connect to Hashem and reach such a high level. And it's actually Mefurish Rambam. The Rambam in Yesodei HaTorah, Perek Zayin, Halacha Aleph, says the following. It says that the level of prophecy, Ena Nevuah Chala, Ela, the prophecy only could reside on a Chacham Gadol B'Chochma, Giboir B'Midoisav, and it says, Vehu Mitkadesh, becomes holy by disconnecting from what the regular person might do, who poresh midarkei klal ha'am, and he teaches himself to always do what Hashem wants him to do, to connect to Hashem, and not to waste his time. V'lo mehevlei hazman, ela da'ato pnuya tamid lemala. His mind is always open to do Ratzon Hashem, to see what does Hashem want me to do, to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that is what Bnei Yisrael did. Hence they were able to remove themselves from the status they were in, that was full of Tumah. However, that's still not enough to reach the level of Nevuah. and Ruach HaKodesh. If you look further in that Rambam, doesn't suffice to disconnect from the Tumah, but you also have to be proactive. You also have to be proactive in connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And how do you connect to Hashem? One word, emunah. When you have emunah and bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we'll soon see, not just a regular emunah in your mind, but a emunah that is so strong that you bring it into fruition, you bring it into maaseh. Like we said last week, there's 3 levels of emunah. There's emunah in your mind, then you have to bring it to your heart, to your emotions, but you also have to actually act upon it, a maaseh. And not like a lot of people tell me, emunah, don't look at me like this, ani dati balev. I'm very religious in my heart. In your heart, soon we'll explain why it's not enough. You have to bring it into a maaseh, and that is what will help you kick it up a notch and get to a higher level. And that is what allowed Bnei Yisrael, aside from disconnecting from the Tumah, but to so quickly reach a high level of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which resulted in Ruach HaKodesh being bestowed upon them, which resulted in the level of prophecy, nevuah, that they had, that even other Nevi'im didn't have. And even every Yid had that. Even the Shifcha, Rashi told us, even the slaves reached such a high level. And this is actually Mefurish Chazal on our Parsha in the Mechilta. It says, B'schar emunah. It's the reward of the emunah. She'eminu avoiseinu b'Hashem. That generation believed in Hashem. Zachu. They were zoiche, they merited v'sharta lahem ruach hakodesh. And that resulted in them appreciating that and saying Shira to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And I want to elaborate on this point. We know that every person has a neshama and a guf. What part are we connected to Hashem with? The neshama. The neshama is the chelek elokim mimal. And that is why Orais HaKudsha Baruch Hu and Israel are one. The Torah, the neshama, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu were all connected, one. But what? What makes barriers between us and Hashem? That is the idea of when a person thinks, I'm capable. I'm able to do this. It's me. I worked on myself. I can take care of myself. I don't need anyone else. That is what creates tumah. That's what creates barriers between us and Hashem, and hence does not allow Ruach HaKodesh to be bestowed upon us. As Yirmiyahu says, Wicked is the person that believes in another person or in himself and on HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and hence his heart, his emotions run away from Hashem. The Reshis Chochma says in Sha'ar Ahava, it is impossible for a person to be davek, connected to Hashem, davek be'elokav, im en lo bitachon, if he doesn't have emunah and bitachon HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And in the positive side, the Maharal in Nesivos Olam, Nesiva Emunah says, Ke ha'ma'amin bo yisborach davek boy. Whoever believes and trusts in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he's connected to him, he's mamash glued to him. U'magia zeh ad ein ketz ve'ad ein sof. There's no end to the levels you can reach by having a very high level of emunah. And we know also this is summarized by the pasuk, Verastich li be'emunah. The connection, the engagement to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the chibur, is all through emunah. Based on what we said thus far, we have now the kelim, the tools to answer all the questions. When Bnei Yisrael hit, the Or Chaim HaKadosh explains to us, there was huge midas adin in the air. You're going to ask me, what do you mean? They left Mitzrayim, even though they were going into the wilderness, to the midbar, to the desert, and they didn't even know what they're going to eat. Didn't they have amazing emunah? Yes, the problem is, says the Or Chaim HaKadosh, but on the way they said, why didn't we just stay in Mitzrayim? That triggered midas adin in the air. And hence, to overcome that midas adin, they needed to do a big maaseh and emunah, and hence HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't just tell Moshe Rabbeinu, take your staff and now split the sea and then go in. The order was opposite. Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, don't stop screaming to me now. It's not a time to scream. You want to overcome the midas adin in the air? You have to get Bnei Yisrael to do a big maaseh that proves the extreme level of emunah they have. They have to go into the ocean right now, despite the fact that it's dangerous. And through that will allow you to take your staff and hit the water, and the water will split. And that's indeed what happened. That's what the Or Chaim HaKadosh explains. And it's b'schut that huge act of emunah and bitachon But we never saw such an act, almost in history, that all Klal Yisrael were going to the water and they weren't worried, they weren't scared. That emunah in Hashem, that defeated the midas adin, because we know the maisim we do down here, hit'orerut miletata, from the bottom, that was me'oirer chesed and shefa to come down, and that allowed us to connect Hashem in such a level, thanks to the maisa and emunah, not just thinking emunah, not even just having it in our hearts, but bringing into fruition, into maisa, going into the ocean. Despite the fact that we didn't know, and the Midrash tells us they were fighting who's going to go first, they had such strong emunah at that point. And that also created the ripple effect of achieving such a high level of prophecy, of nevuah, and nevuah HaKodesh. The Gemara in Soita says they were literally fighting with each other who gets to go in first. As a result of this action that portrayed a tremendous level of emunah and bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that wiped away the mechitzis, the barriers between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the levels that we said, the tumah levels of kochi ve'otzam yadi, it removed that, and hence we're able to connect HaKadosh Baruch Hu to such an extreme level, which resulted in Ruach HaKodesh and the prophecy, a level of prophecy. And hence they did Shira HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Shem Mishmuel says, with this, I want to answer my father's question. His father was the Heilige Avnei Nezer, also wrote the Iglei Tal. How come Bnei Yisrael didn't need new mitzvahs, new positive commandments, mitzvahs aseh, to have the merit to be saved in Kriyas Yamsuf? Harei, we know that Chazal tell us they were naked of mitzvahs, and you need positive mitzvahs in order to mizakech your guf. You need your guf to be cleansed in spirituality and remove those barriers of tumah we talked about, of kochi ve'otzam yadi. And they didn't have merits in Mitzrayim. They needed to do a maisa, not just emunah in their minds. And hence they were given those two mitzvahs, the famous mitzvahs, aseh, of bris milah, and of doing the korban pesach. How come, in order to be saved from Mitzrayim, how come they didn't need mitzvahs now, before Kriyas Yamsuf? That's what his father asks, and he answers, because instead of that, and even better than that, was this tremendous ma'aseh emunah. And as the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh said, without them going into the ocean, midas adin were overcome. They weren't able to beat that. They needed that. And that ma'aseh is mizakech the guf. It makes the guf mamish part of the neshama, which is exactly what we're in this world for. To mizakech the guf. You do that by disconnecting from tumah, not wasting your time, using this holy prosdor, hallway that we have in this world, to always think, how do we connect to Hashem? How do we remove ourselves from tumah? How do we not waste our time, but rather always think how to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And that's what the mitzvahs are here for us. That's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu zikalam Torah mitzvahs for this, to mizakech haguf. That's what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu, who reached the peak of this. When he came down, he was glowing. Why? Because his body was mezukach legamre. We alluded to earlier that it's not enough to have in your heart to believe in Hashem. Yes, believe is a huge thing, and even your heart, Rahman Ali, bye. We know HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants your heart. But it doesn't suffice to be able to cleanse your guf. You need a maaseh, you need to do an action, a mitzvah, an action that proves your emunah. And through that, and only through that, you're able to cleanse your body and make it one with your neshama. And that's the name of the game over here. The higher level you are in the emunah, the more actions you do, not just in your heart. Lo dati balev. Dati balev, that brings it into a maaseh. And I want to suggest that perhaps this is also the level that a person that dies on Kiddush Hashem reaches such a high level in Shamayim. Because that is the epitome of doing a maaseh, that you show how much you trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You realize there's an afterlife. You realize what life is all about is not here. Life is all about emunah and getting closer and closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And a person that is willing to give up his life to do Ratzon Hashem, en lecha ma'aseh gadol mizeh, to show your emunah, like Bnei Yisrael did when they went into the Yam, despite the fact that it looked like it was game over if we do such a thing. But no, they showed HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the world how they blinded just HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By that, they brought down Shefa milemala, midas hachesed, and hence, it's only through that action, says the Ohr HaChaim HaKadosh, that now Moshe Rabbeinu was able to take his staff, hit with the staff, and through that triggered the splitting of the sea. But it was really, that staff represented their action of Mesirus Nefesh going into the ocean. So we managed to answer all our questions. How could it be that Bnei Yisrael were able to so quickly go from a place of Memtet Sharei Tuma to a level of extremity, Ruach HaKodesh, and prophecy? A level of prophecy, the answer is, it was a two-phase. First of all, they disconnected from the Tumah. They were really willing to blindly follow HaKadosh Baruch Hu and leave all the Tumah behind. But that's not enough. They also needed to do a self-sacrificing action that screamed out how much they believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And by doing that, we remove the barriers between us and Hashem, which the guf represents sometimes, and we're mezakech the guf by doing those maisim. And through that, we bring down, we trigger in the spiritual DNA of the world that Hashem created, shefa, midas chesed, and through that we were saved. And we should take it as a lesson to all of us that that's how we should live life. And when a person feels like things are not going his way, and midas adin is hovering over him, and we all have those times, as we mentioned before, the Arizal says again and again, it's exactly during those times that it's even more important that you put your head down and you realize, I'm nothing, everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I'm willing to do anything that Hashem wants me to do because I have full emunah and bitachon b'HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that itself, ha'gufa, will bring down the shefa. Yiratzon that will be zoiche to live our lives in such a fashion. How much does the Yiddins in the world need us to act like that right now? When we need bracha, shefa, hatzlacha, for all of Klal Yisrael, wherever they are, and especially for the soldiers that are right now doing their best, their ishtadlus to fight for us, and giving up their lives, mesirus nefesh, for us to be able to be oived on ourselves and get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I would like to end with a very short story brought down in this book called Hineni Biyadcha, and it's Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein brings it in. It comes from his sefer, actually, Baruch Nafshi. And there was a true maaseh that someone came to the Chazon Ish who was mechazik many Yiddins around the world, and they came to him to get brachas. And there was a person that came up to him, and you could see he looked very depressed, very down, and he looked like there was a big burden weighing on him. And he came to the Chazon Ish and he said to him, I wasn't feeling well, and I realized I needed to go to see a doctor. And I went to the doctor, and the doctor made me do all kinds of checks. And at a certain point, I realized I have a very bad infection throughout my whole body. And the doctor looked at me and said, I'm sorry, you only have 4 days to live. At that point, this person from the Chazon Ish started breaking down into tears. He couldn't even catch his breath. Chazon Ish looked at him with half a smile, and he said, I want to show you something. Come with me. He took from his shelf a Chumash Bereshis, and he started going to the beginning of the Parsha of Parshas Bereshis, and he started going through with him what Hashem managed to create on the first day. And then he showed him, and look what Hashem created on the second day, and look what Hashem managed to create on the third day, and look what Hashem managed to create in the fourth day, on Wednesday. Then he stopped, the Chazon Ish stopped, looked in the eyes of the person standing in front of him, and he said, no, what do you think? If HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ribono Shel Olam, the creator of the world, was able to do so much and create so much in 4 days, do you not believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu won't be able to find a remedy to cure your situation in the next 4 days? He says, do not give up. A Yid is not supposed to have Yeush. In these days coming up, you have to daven with all your heart, as we spoke about this idea of davening with all your heart, a true tefillah, because Sharei Dima Lo Ninalu, the gates of tears have not been locked, and you can scream out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in these 4 days, especially when a person davens about himself when he's sick, has a special power to it, and everything will be okay. Mirtzeh Hashem. Don't give up. The person in front of Chazon Ish left with rejuvenated energies and hope, and he left, and indeed he gave it all his God in his davening every day, in his tefillahs, and an unbelievable thing happened. A couple days later, from America, there came a new medicine exactly for this type of thing, which was very new, off the shelf, wasn't used yet in Israel, only in America, and it was for infections all over the body. And the doctors called him up and said, listen, we have this new thing, are you willing to be the first in Israel to try it? They only used it in the States for a couple of patients, and now we have the opportunity to use it here. And the patient said, yes, I'm willing to try it. And indeed, within a couple of days, they already saw that the situation was improved. And you see from here an unbelievable idea that the Chazon Ish tried to show him. Listen, always, we have to believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because we know HaKadosh Baruch Hu Hakol Yachol En Od Milvadoi. And that's exactly the idea that we saw in the Parsha with Bnei Yisrael. Ad Kedei Kach, that when you do it to an extreme and you act upon it, you could be zoiche to reach a level of Ruach HaKodesh and even a level of Nevuah. Have a good Shabbat.
This concludes another episode of The Prism of Torah. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed it and learned something valuable. If you did, please subscribe to the podcast and give a 5-star rating. You can also find this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, or our own website, prismoftorah.com, where we have a full archive of all our past episodes. We would like to thank Yona Vefa for the recording equipment and Ellie Podcast Productions for handling all our post-podcast productions. Join us next week for another enlightening conversation on the Prism of Torah.